I called my parents 9 times from a hospital bed the doctors weren't sure I'd leave alive. My mother let every call ring out because my sister needed help moving a couch into her new house. I lay there with a clot in my lung and an oxygen line in my nose, watching my own phone tell me that the people who made me were busy lifting furniture 25 minutes away. I run a company that takes care of people when they're at their weakest. I just never thought I'd learn who my family was from the weakest moment of mine. So I picked up the phone one more time. Not to them. To my lawyer. And by the time they finally walked into that room, the cost of ignoring me was already signed and witnessed. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where the people who quietly hold everything together finally get heard. If you've ever been the strong one nobody worried about, you'll feel this one in your chest. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe so the next story finds you. My name is Kara Myers, and I'm 36. I own a home care agency in central Indiana, the kind that sends aides into people's houses when they get too old or too sick to manage alone. I built it from one client and a used minivan into a company with 40 caregivers. It is the great irony of my life that I spend every day making sure strangers aren't left alone when they're frightened. And I had no idea, none, that my own family would leave me exactly that way the first time it was me in the bed. For the few weeks before all this, I hadn't felt right. Short of breath climbing the stairs at the office, a dull ache in my left calf I kept blaming on a long drive. I did the responsible thing. I saw my doctor, who frowned at my leg and said the words possible clot and ordered tests and told me to watch for chest pain or trouble breathing. I nodded. I scheduled the follow-up. And then I went right back to work. Because I am the steady one. And steady people do not have time to be patients. That phrase, the steady one, has organized my entire life. My mother gave it to me when I was a girl, and I wore it like a medal for 30 years before I understood it was really just permission. Permission for everyone to lean, and never once ask how I was holding the weight. Here is what nobody in my family knew, or maybe what they preferred not to know. I was the money, not in a flashy way. In the quiet, structural way that holds a family up without anyone noticing the beam. I paid for my parents' spot in a nice assisted living community, the one my mother bragged about to her bridge group as if she'd chosen it herself. I had named them the primary beneficiaries on a life insurance policy big enough to matter, because if anything ever happened to me, I wanted them safe. I had even, that very month, agreed to put up the down payment on my sister Bridget's new house, the one she and her husband Dennis could not have afforded otherwise. I never asked for thanks. Thanks wasn't the point. The point was that I could. So I did. And being the one who could felt close enough to being loved that I stopped checking the difference. My mother and I had talked on the phone just a week before everything happened. I'd mentioned, lightly, that I was tired. That my doctor wanted more tests. She'd breezed right past it the way she breezes past anything that isn't about Bridget or the grandkids. "Oh, you're the strong one, Kara," she said, warm and certain. "You'll be fine. You always are. You'll be fine. You always are." I had heard that sentence my whole life, in 100 shapes, and I'd always taken it as a compliment. It took a hospital bed to teach me what it actually was. It was a door. Closing. It was my mother deciding in advance that my needs were a thing she'd never have to attend to, because she'd labeled me the one who didn't have any. I just didn't know yet how literally she meant it. It happened on a Friday morning at the office. I was standing at the scheduling board, coffee in hand, working out coverage for a weekend client, when the room tilted. Not dizziness exactly. Something worse. It felt like the air had thickened, like I was breathing through a wet cloth, and no matter how hard I pulled, nothing arrived. My chest seized. A pain went through it, sharp enough that the coffee cup slipped out of my hand and shattered on the floor, and the sound seemed to come from very far away. My office manager, a no-nonsense woman named Pam, who has been with me since the minivan days, took one look at my face and dialed 911 before I'd even finished sliding down the side of the filing cabinet. I remember the floor was cold against my cheek. I remember Pam's voice, very steady, telling the dispatcher my age and that I couldn't breathe, and thinking, distantly, that she was good in a crisis, that I'd trained her well. I remember the ceiling tiles, then the paramedics, and an oxygen mask, and a man with kind eyes asking me to squeeze his fingers, and the particular terror of trying to answer and not having enough breath to make words. They loaded me into the ambulance. The doors closed. And somewhere in that ride, between the siren and the strange floating feeling of not getting enough air, a clear, cold thought cut through everything else. I might actually die today. Me, the one who was always fine, the one who took care of everyone else. I might die on a Friday on a gurney, and the last thing I'd done was figure out someone else's weekend schedule. The emergency room moved fast in the way that tells you it's bad. Scans, a line in my arm, voices using words over my head. By the time they had an answer, I was in the intensive care unit, and a doctor with tired, honest eyes was standing at the foot of my bed telling me the truth, because I'd asked her to. A pulmonary embolism, a blood clot, the one that had been quietly forming in my leg, had broken loose and traveled to my lung. A large one. She did not soften it. She told me it was serious, that the next day or two were the dangerous part, that they were giving me medication to keep it from growing and to keep my body stable while they decided on next steps. She told me people did recover from this. She also told me, gently, that some didn't, and that I should let my family know I was here. Let my family know. I lay in that bed with the oxygen hissing in my nose and the monitor counting my heartbeat out loud, and I felt more alone than I have ever felt in my life. Not because no one was there, because the people who were supposed to come running were a phone call away, and I suddenly wasn't sure, for the first time, that they would run. I reached for my phone on the tray table. My hand was shaking. I told myself I was being dramatic, that of course they'd come, that my mother would be there before the hour was out, scolding me for not calling sooner. I found her name. I pressed it, and I waited to hear my mother's voice tell me everything was going to be all right. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Her cheerful recorded voice, the one she's had for a decade, telling me to leave a message and she'd call me right back. I did. I kept it short because short was all my lungs could manage. Mom, it's me. I'm in the ICU at St. Vincent's. They found a clot in my lung. It's serious. Please call me back as soon as you get this. I hung up and stared at the ceiling and told myself she was driving, or in the shower, or had left her phone in the other room the way she always does. I gave it 10 minutes by the clock on the monitor. Then I called my father. Same thing. 4 rings, voicemail, his slow, careful greeting. I left him the same message, my voice thinner this time. I told myself one of them would see it any second. I knew, distantly, that it was a Friday, and that Bridget had been planning her big move into the new house this weekend, the house my money was buying. I knew my parents had promised to help her carry boxes. But surely a clot in your daughter's lung outranks a couch. Surely there is a line, somewhere, even in my family, where a medical emergency beats an errand. I lay there and watched my phone and waited for it to light up with my mother's name. It is a strange thing, to be possibly dying and to spend the time worrying that you're being needy. That's what 36 years of being the strong one does to you. Even on the edge, I was apologizing in my head for the inconvenience of my own emergency. Over the next 2 hours, I called 5 more times, 3 to my mother, 2 to my father. Every single one rang its full count and dropped into voicemail. After the 6th call, I stopped leaving messages because there was nothing left to say that I hadn't already said, and because hearing my own frightened voice played back in my head was making it worse. Then I made the mistake of opening the family group chat. There it was, scrolling up my screen in real time. My mother, active right now, posting photos. A picture of Bridget's new living room with boxes stacked to the ceiling. A picture of my father, red-faced and grinning, holding one end of that couch. A string of laughing emojis. A message from my mother that said, "Best day. So proud of our girl and her beautiful new home." Our girl. I want to stop here, because I know some of you watching have felt this exact thing. You've been left on red while the family carried on without you. You've watched, in real time, the proof that you were not the priority you'd spent your life being for them. If that's you, I'm sorry. It is a specific kind of heartbreak, the quiet kind, and it deserves to be named out loud. So do me a favor. Drop a comment with the name of the one person who would drop everything and come if it were you in that bed. Tag them in your heart right now. I read every comment. Back in the ICU, I set my phone face down on the tray, and for the first time since the ambulance, I didn't feel afraid anymore. I felt something colder and clearer taking its place. My phone did buzz once, that afternoon. For half a second my heart leapt, the old reflex, certain it was my mother finally calling. It was a text from Bridget. She had clearly seen the messages I'd left in the chaos, the ones where I'd written that I was in the hospital, that it was serious. She had read them, and this is what my sister sent me, while I lay in intensive care. OMG, busy with the move today, but glad you're being looked after. Rest up. Talk soon. Glad you're being looked after. As if I had checked into a spa. As if the strangers monitoring my heart rate were a service I'd treated myself to, and not the only people in the building standing between me and the worst outcome. I read it 3 times. I kept waiting for a follow-up, a second text that said, "Wait. The hospital? Are you okay? What's happening? I'm coming." It never came. Bridget had decided, in the space of one cheerful message, that my emergency was handled, that being looked after by professionals released her from any obligation to look up from her boxes. And the awful thing, the thing I made myself sit with in that quiet room, was that she'd learned it from somewhere. She'd learned it from a lifetime of watching our mother treat me as the one who was always fine. She was just repeating the family religion, the one I'd never thought to question either, until the machines were beeping and nobody came. I didn't text back. There was nothing to say to a person who thinks a heart emoji is the same as showing up. I put the phone down again, and I started, slowly, to think about everything I had built, and exactly whose names were written on it. There was one more name in my phone I hadn't tried. My younger brother, Eli. Eli is 30, the baby of the family, a high school shop teacher 2 towns over, and he has always existed slightly outside the gravity that organizes the rest of us. He isn't the favorite, and he isn't the workhorse. He's just kind in an uncomplicated way the rest of us never quite managed. I almost didn't call him. I told myself he had a class, that it wasn't fair to scare him. All the old habits of a woman who apologizes for needing things. But I was tired and frightened and out of pride, so I pressed his name. He picked up on the second ring. The second ring. I barely got it out. "Eli, I'm in the hospital." And my voice finally cracked on the last of it, and he didn't ask a single follow-up question about logistics or how bad or whether it could wait. He just said, "Which one? I'm coming right now." And he hung up before I could tell him not to. 40 minutes later he came through the door of my room still in his work clothes, sawdust on his jeans, his face white with worry, and he crossed straight to the bed and took my hand in both of his and said, "I'm here. I've got you. I'm not going anywhere." I cried then, for the first time since the ambulance. Not because I was scared of dying, because for 36 years I had been the one who showed up for everyone, and I had genuinely not known until that moment what it felt like to have someone show up for me. It felt like setting down something I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it had weight. Eli stayed. He called his school and got a substitute. He slept in the terrible vinyl chair by my bed, and when the nurses came at 3 in the morning to check my lines, he woke up every time, just to make sure nothing was wrong. By the second day the medication was working. My oxygen numbers climbed. The danger was easing, the doctor said, though I wasn't out of the woods. And somewhere in that long night, lucid and clear-headed for the first time, oxygen steady, I did the thing I do best. I took an honest accounting. I thought about the assisted living payments leaving my account every month. I thought about the insurance policy with my parents' names on it. I thought about the down payment for Bridget's house. Money I had promised before I knew what I know now. And I thought about the last 2 days, the 9 unanswered calls, the couch, the heart emoji, the phrase "glad you're being looked after." I was not angry. Exactly. Anger is hot, and this was cold. This was a ledger finally being read correctly. For my whole life, I had given my family the benefit of the doubt, had told myself they loved me in their way, had filled in the silence with excuses on their behalf, and in 2 days they had shown me, with total clarity, where I ranked. Below a move, below a couch, below the convenience of believing I never needed anything. I looked over at Eli, asleep in the awful chair with his hand still near mine, and I understood something simple. I had been pouring my life into the people who wouldn't come and stepping right over the one who did. That was going to stop. All of it. And I knew exactly how to make it official. The next morning made the decision easy. I woke to my phone lighting up with the group chat again. My mother, bright and early, posting a photo of the new kitchen, fully unpacked. All moved in, treated everyone to pizza last night. What a weekend. So blessed. I scrolled the whole thread, slowly, all the way back. 2 full days of messages, photos of boxes and couches and grandkids and pizza. Not one word about me, not one. My name had not appeared in my family's conversation in 48 hours, while I lay in an intensive care unit a 15-minute drive from where they ate that pizza. My mother had found the time to photograph a kitchen and praise herself for being blessed. She had not found the time to ask whether her oldest daughter was still breathing. I set the phone down on the white hospital blanket. I want to tell you I felt a great wave of fury, but I didn't. I felt the opposite. I felt very calm and very clear, the way you feel when a long, confusing equation finally resolves into a single clean number. They had told me, in every way available to them, exactly what I was worth to them when I had nothing to offer. So I would simply update my own records to match. That is the only revenge a bookkeeper of the heart ever really takes. Not destruction, just accuracy. I picked the phone back up. I did not open the group chat. I did not call my mother. I scrolled to a different name, one I trusted with the things that matter, and I made the only call that morning that I actually wanted to make. Joel Whitfield has been my attorney since the 2nd year of the business, the one who drew up my company's contracts and, 3 years ago, my estate documents. He's a careful, decent man who has talked me out of more than one rash idea over the years. So when he answered and I told him, calmly, what I wanted, he was quiet for a moment. I told him where I was. I told him about the clot, and the ICU, and the 9 calls, and the pizza. I told him I wanted to change my beneficiaries, rewrite my will, stop the automatic assisted living payments, and formally withdraw the down payment funds for Bridget's house before they cleared. I wanted it all done properly, and I wanted it done now, at the hospital. There was a pause on the line. Then Joel, being Joel, asked the right question. "Kara," he said, "I'll do whatever you tell me to do. But I have to ask because I'm your lawyer and your friend. Are you sure this is a decision and not a wound? Because those can look the same in a hospital bed, and I don't want you doing something today that you'd unwind in a month." I appreciated him for asking. I'd have been disappointed if he hadn't, and I gave him the truest answer I had. "Joel," I said, "I've spent 36 years giving these people the benefit of the doubt. The last 2 days they finally answered the question I never let myself ask. This isn't me being hurt. This is me believing them." He was quiet again, just for a second. Then he said he'd be there within the hour, and he asked me to make sure my doctor was available, because we were going to do this exactly right. I knew from years of estate work that the most important thing was not the documents themselves, but the question someone would inevitably raise later. Was she even in her right mind? People who get cut out of a will love nothing more than to claim the person was confused, medicated, manipulated, not herself. I was not going to give them that door. So before Joel arrived, I asked to speak with my attending physician, the same honest-eyed doctor who had leveled with me on the first night. I explained what I intended to do and why. I asked her, plainly, whether she could confirm in my chart that I was alert, oriented, and fully capable of making my own legal and financial decisions. She looked at me for a long moment, the kind of look one tired, competent woman gives another, and she said yes. She said my labs were stable, my oxygen was good, I was lucid and clear, and that in her medical judgment I had full capacity. She offered to note it in my record and to witness the signing herself if it would help. I told her it would help more than she knew. My night nurse, Donna, a sturdy woman with reading glasses on a chain and zero tolerance for nonsense, agreed to be the second witness. I'd watched Donna run that unit for 2 nights with a steadiness I recognized, and I trusted her instinctively. By the time Joel walked in with his briefcase, everything was in place. A doctor to confirm my mind, a nurse to witness my hand, a lawyer to make it real. For the first time in days, I felt like myself again. Not the patient. The woman who builds things properly, so that no one can tear them down later. Joel set his briefcase on the foot of my bed and laid the papers out on the rolling tray table, the same table they'd been bringing my untouched meals on for 2 days. It became, in that moment, the most important desk I have ever signed at. One by one, he walked me through them, plain and unhurried, the doctor on one side of the bed and Donna on the other. First, the change of beneficiary on the life insurance. My parents' names came off. In their place went Eli, and a second name that surprised even me as I said it, a caregiver relief fund I'd been meaning to start at my own company for years, a small endowment for the aides who break down caring for everyone else. Second, the new will, redirecting my estate along the same lines. Third, the order halting the automatic monthly payments to my parents' assisted living account. And fourth, the formal withdrawal of the down payment funds for Bridget's house, signed and dated before the wire could clear. I read each page. I understood each page. And then I signed my name, my own steady hand, the doctor watching, Donna witnessing, Joel notarizing. There was no drama to it, no tears, no speeches, just the quiet scratch of a pen, over and over, rewriting my life so that it finally pointed at the people who'd actually shown up. When the last signature was dry, I sat back against the pillows and felt lighter than I had in years. I looked at Joel, and at the doctor, and at Donna, and I said the only thing that captured it. I signed my whole life over to the people who actually showed up, I told them. From the bed, the rest of them couldn't be bothered to visit. Donna, witnessing her 100th quiet human catastrophe, just nodded once, like she'd seen this exact reckoning before, and was glad this time to be on the right side of it. Joel gathered the signed, witnessed, notarized documents back into his briefcase, copies for me, originals filed where they needed to go. At the door, he paused and looked back at me, and there was something in his face that wasn't quite a smile, but was close to respect. "It's done," he said. "It's clean. Nobody's undoing this." Then he left, and the room was quiet again, just me and the monitor and Eli, who had stepped out for coffee and come back to find his whole family rearranged on a tray table and asked no questions, because Eli has always understood that some decisions explain themselves. I did not call my parents to tell them what I'd done. I did not text the group chat. I felt no urge to announce it, no need to throw it in anyone's face. That isn't who I am, and besides, the whole point of doing it quietly and correctly was that it didn't depend on their reaction at all. It was simply true now, witnessed and filed, whether they ever found out or not. I lay back and closed my eyes. Somewhere across town, my mother was unpacking a kitchen and feeling blessed. Somewhere, my sister was arranging throw pillows in a house she didn't yet know had stopped being possible. And here I was, in the bed none of them had visited, finally, strangely, at peace. They would find out eventually. People always do. The assisted living office would send a letter. The bank would flag the missing funds. And then, only then, they would come. I was sure of it. The day the money stopped, they would finally remember they had a daughter. I just intended to be recovered enough by then to be sitting up when they walked in. I was right, of course. It just took a few days. By the third day, I'd been moved out of the ICU into a regular room, the clot stabilized, the danger behind me, a long, boring recovery and months of blood thinners ahead. Eli came every day after school. He brought me real food and bad magazines and sat with me, and we talked more in those few days than we had in years, two siblings discovering, late, that they actually liked each other. My parents still did not call. Bridget still did not call. The silence, which had once felt like a wound, now felt almost like a courtesy, a window of peace before the storm I knew was coming. The storm started with the bank. My business accountant, who I'd looped in, let me know the down payment withdrawal had gone through cleanly, the funds pulled back before they could transfer to the title company for Bridget's house, which meant that somewhere, in some closing office, a wire that was supposed to arrive simply hadn't. I pictured it without much feeling. A loan officer frowning at a screen, a title agent making an awkward phone call. My sister's brand new house, the one full of unpacked boxes and arranged throw pillows, quietly developing a hole in its foundation that no amount of pizza could fill. I was not gleeful about it. I want to be honest, because I think honesty is the only thing that makes a story like this worth telling. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a kind of grim, level calm, the calm of a woman watching a consequence she didn't create, but had finally stopped preventing. For 36 years, I'd been the safety net. I'd just stopped catching them, and gravity was about to do the rest. Dennis was the first to feel it, because Dennis is the kind of man who feels money before he feels anything else. He called Eli, not me, because it apparently still hadn't occurred to anyone to call the woman in the hospital directly. Eli put it on speaker and we listened together, his eyebrows climbing higher with every sentence. Dennis was rattled. The bank was saying the down payment hadn't come through, the closing was in jeopardy, the sellers were threatening to walk. Did Eli know what was going on? Was there some mix-up? Because Kara had promised? Kara always came through. Kara was reliable. There it was again. Kara always comes through. Kara is reliable. The same sentence in a man's panicked voice that my mother had used my whole life to mean I never had to think about her needs. Eli, bless him, kept his voice flat and just said he didn't know anything about Kara's finances and that maybe they should ask Kara, who was, he reminded Dennis pointedly, still in the hospital. There was a small, telling pause on the line. You could almost hear Dennis remembering, with annoyance, that I was sick, as if my illness were now an inconvenient obstacle to my usefulness. They still didn't get it. That's what struck me, listening. Even now, with the money gone, they weren't worried about me. They were worried about what my absence was costing them. I want to pause and ask you something, because I genuinely want to know. Have you ever realized that your family valued what you provided more than they valued you? That the love was really just billing? If you have, tell me in the comments. You are not alone, and you are not wrong to have felt the difference. After Dennis hung up, Eli looked at me and said quietly, "They have no idea, do they?" They didn't, but they were about to. Bridget called me directly that evening, the first time my sister had called me, not texted, not heart emoji'd, but actually called, since before I collapsed. For one foolish second I thought maybe Dennis had finally told her how sick I'd been, that this was the call where she said she was sorry, where she asked how I was, where she remembered she had a sister and not just a benefactor. That is not what the call was. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't mention the ICU. She got right to it, her voice tight with a stress that had nothing to do with my lung. "Kara, hey, is there some problem with the down payment? The bank's saying the money didn't come, and Dennis is freaking out, and we could lose the house. Did something happen with your account? Did something happen with your account?" I lay there in my hospital bed, 4 days after she'd left me on red, while I might have been dying, and I listened to my sister's only concern be whether my account was working, and I felt the last thread of something snap, gently, with no pain at all. I said evenly. Bridget, I called our parents 9 times from the ICU. You texted me a heart emoji and told me to rest up. There was a silence. What does that have to do with the house? She said, and the honest confusion in her voice told me everything. She truly did not connect them. The version of me that almost died and the version of me that funded her life were, to her, two completely separate accounts, and only one of them had ever interested her. It has everything to do with the house, I said, but I'm not going to explain it over the phone. If you want to talk about it, all of you, you can come see me. You remember where I am. You've had the address for 4 days. My mother started calling within the hour. Bridget must have hung up and called her in a panic, because suddenly my phone, which had sat silent and dark through the worst 2 days of my life, would not stop lighting up with my mother's name. Once, twice, 5 times. The very thing I had begged for from the ICU, my mother's face on my screen, was finally happening. Days too late. And now that it was here, I felt nothing but a clean, cold clarity. I did not pick up. I want you to understand that this was not pettiness, not an eye for an eye. I genuinely had nothing to say to her over the phone, and I knew, from a lifetime of experience, exactly how a phone call with my mother goes. She talks. She reframes. She finds the angle where she is the wronged party and I am the difficult one, and she does it so fast and so smoothly that I end up apologizing before I've remembered what I was upset about. She is a master of the medium of the phone call, where there are no witnesses and no paper, only her voice and my old, trained instinct to soothe her. So no, not on the phone. If my mother wanted to have this conversation, she would have it in person, in the room she hadn't visited, in front of the people who had seen me sign my name. She would have it on my ground for once, where her voice was just a voice, and the documents were real and witnessed and could not be talked away. I let every call ring out, the way she had let mine. Then I turned my phone face down, looked at Eli and said, "They're coming tomorrow. I can feel it." He nodded. "You want me here?" "Yes," I said. "And Joel, I want this done right." I spent that night getting ready the only way I know how, which is to get my facts in order and decide, in advance, who I was going to be when the room filled up. I asked Joel to come by in the morning and to bring copies of everything: the witnessed beneficiary change, the new will, the halted payment order, the withdrawal confirmation. Not to wave in anyone's face, just to have on the tray table, quiet and real, so that nothing I said could be dismissed as a sick woman's threat. I called Joel and walked him through it, and he gave me one piece of advice that I wrote down on the back of a hospital menu. "Don't argue with them," he said. "Whatever your mother says, however she spins it, don't defend yourself. The second you argue, it stops being about what's true and starts being about who's louder, and she's had 60 years of practice being louder. You don't have to win a fight. You just have to tell them what's already done and let the paper say the rest. Don't argue. Let the paper say the rest." I'd known Joel a long time, and he'd never once given me bad counsel. I lay in the dark and rehearsed being calm. I thought about every family confrontation I'd ever lost, every time my mother's certainty had steamrolled my facts, every time I'd walked away having somehow agreed I was the problem. And I realized the thing that had always beaten me wasn't her argument. It was my own need for her approval, the need that made me flinch and fold. But something in me had changed in that ICU. The need was gone. You cannot manipulate a person who has stopped hoping you'll love them correctly. For the first time in my life, I had nothing left for my mother to take. It was my father who called last, late that night, alone. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maybe because his name on the screen has never carried the same weight as my mother's. His voice was small and rough, like he'd been sitting somewhere in the dark working up to it. "Kara," he said. "Honey, Bridget told us about the hospital, about how bad it was." A long pause, the sound of an old man trying to find words he'd never practiced. "Is it true you called 9 times? That first day?" I said it was. I heard him breathe out, shaky, and when he spoke again, his voice broke clean in half. I had my phone in my pocket the whole time, he said. I felt it buzzing. I thought it was the moving company. Your mother said don't worry about it. Finish the couch. We'll check it later. And I listened to her. I listened to her instead of my own daughter. He started to cry then. My quiet, undramatic father, the man I have maybe seen cry twice in my life. I almost lost you, he said, and I was carrying a couch. I let him cry. I didn't rush to make it okay, the way I would have my whole life. But I wasn't cruel to him either, because my father's sin was always cowardice, never malice. And there is a difference. Dad, I said finally gently, I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. But things are going to be different now. I need you to know that before tomorrow. He was quiet. Then he said the thing that told me he was the only one who'd actually understood. I know, he said. I'm just glad you're alive to make them different. I'll be there in the morning. I'm coming whether she does or not. They came the next morning, all of them, filing into my hospital room like a delegation. My mother led, of course. She came in first, and she came in glowing, with a grocery store bouquet wrapped in crinkling plastic and a smile so bright and so practiced that for a second I almost admired it. There was no apology in that smile. There was no fear, no shame, none of the haunted look my father wore as he came in behind her. My mother had decided, somewhere on the drive over, that the way to handle this was to skip straight past the last 5 days as if they hadn't happened, to flood the room with cheer until everyone agreed to pretend along with her. She set the flowers on my tray table, right on top of the very space where I'd signed everything away, and she leaned down and kissed my forehead and said, "Oh, sweetheart, look at you. You gave us such a scare. But you're the strong one. I knew you'd pull through just fine." There it was. The sentence of my entire life, delivered over a bouquet, in front of my brother and my lawyer and a sister and brother-in-law hovering anxious by the door. You're the strong one. I knew you'd pull through fine, as if my survival had been a foregone conclusion, as if her absence had been a vote of confidence rather than a verdict. And then, barely a breath later, before I had even responded, she got to what she'd actually come for. "Now," she said, settling into the chair beside my bed with the air of a woman taking charge of a small mess. "Bridget tells me there's some confusion with the bank, some mix-up with the house money. So let's just sort that out, shall we? I'm sure it's nothing we can't fix. Let's just sort that out." I looked at my mother's bright, expectant face, and I understood she still, even now, had absolutely no idea what was about to happen. I did not raise my voice. This is the part I want you to picture clearly, because it is the whole of who I decided to be in that room. My mother had just breezed past my near death and gone straight for the money, in front of witnesses, and every instinct I'd been raised with told me to either soothe her or scream. I did neither. I reached over, and I gently moved her bouquet off the tray table, and I nodded to Joel, who stepped forward and laid a small stack of papers down in the space where the flowers had been. Then I folded my hands and I told them, quietly, what I had done. I told them that on the second day in this hospital, when none of them had come, when none of them had called, I had asked my lawyer to meet me here. I told them I had removed them as beneficiaries of my life insurance, that I had rewritten my will, that I had stopped the automatic payments that had been quietly covering their assisted living for years, payments I was fairly sure my mother believed came from a pension or the government or thin air, because she had never once asked, and that I had withdrawn the down payment for Bridget's house before it cleared, which was why the bank had no money to give them. I said it all in the flat, even voice I used to deliver hard numbers to nervous clients. No venom, no flourish, just the facts, set down one at a time like coins on a counter. The room had gone completely silent. My mother's smile was still on her face, but it had frozen, stranded there, a smile that no longer had a thought behind it. And into that silence I said the only line I had let myself prepare, the truest sentence I have ever spoken to my mother. "I called you 9 times from this bed," I said. You came when the couch was in, so I changed everything from the bed you didn't visit.